All right, I think we're gonna start. There's two more people to join, but yeah, I know it's early in the US and late in some places in Asia, so start again with the presentation. So thank you again for joining. We're here today to talk a bit more about sugar mapping. Is a tool that Bonsucro has been working with SupplyShift to develop. Just a few housekeeping rules. So we are recording this session, so we'll be able to share it later on with those interested. The presentation and all the information you see today will be shared as well. If you have any questions during the presentation, please write them down in the Q&A function of Zoom. You can see it there on the bottom of your screen or the top of your screen, depending on the Zoom you use. And we'll get to those questions later. We're joined today by Daniel Marley, our CEO at Bonsucro, as well as Jamie Barsimentov, who is co-founder and COO at SupplyShift, and Madeleine Ehlert, who is the Global Sustainable Sourcing Lead for sugar and coconut at Nestle. So yes, we'll be sharing about our experience so far, how the tool was developed, what does it do, and then Nestle will also share about their practical experience of implementing the tool in their supply chain. So first, I would like to hand over to Daniel Marley, our CEO, for...
Thank you, Raphael, and hello everybody that's attending. I can see people are joining as we're just starting, which is great because I think we had about 11 companies who signed up to join this webinar. So I look forward to meeting everybody online. I can see a few familiar names, but also lots of new colleagues joining. So nice to meet you all virtually. I can't see you, but I know you can see me, and it's really exciting. I'm really pleased we've got to this stage. It was a few years in development, and the team will take you through the development a little bit, I think. And thank you to Madeleine from Nestle for joining us as well, because she was very instrumental in the development of this new product. I'm just really pleased that we can be offering it to you, to our Bonsucro members. And it's an exclusive offer to the Bonsucro members, and it's been designed specifically for the end users. And we'll be taking you through what this product does. And you know, really it just helps us to deliver on our strategic aim to create added value along the supply chain. We know that you've all got an incredible job to do in order to, you know, really sort of scale up and speed up the transformation that we're all working on in terms of agriculture and our food systems. And I think that this product is something that you'll find very valuable. So without further ado, I'll hand back over to Rafa and we can get going.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, so we start with an introductory part about Bonsucro. So most of you know what Bonsucro is, but we put this slide because this presentation will be shared with people who are not so familiar with Bonsucro. So we are the leading global sustainability platform for sugarcane, and our purpose is to collectively accelerate the sustainable production and uses of sugarcane. This work on sugar mapping relates to due diligence. So as you know, human rights due diligence is gaining a lot of momentum right now. There is existing legislation on due diligence in several countries, and new legislations that are coming up, particularly in the European Union, around due diligence and how private companies will be expected to carry out due diligence assessments of their supply chains and to respond and take actions to prevent and address issues. This is also aligned to the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights, which is also a very important framework for corporate due diligence. So I think the idea of the tool at its core is to enable companies to collect information to really assess risks in their supply chains, and that's kind of the framework we're using to promote the tool as well. The tool is also very important from a strategic point of view to Bonsucro. So it helps with our aim to strengthen human rights and decent work in sugarcane farming and milling, and it falls under the priority that we have in our 5-year strategy to promote knowledge, best practice, and innovation. The tool, we believe, will improve monitoring, evaluation, and learning and impact reporting. So through collection of supplier information, you'll be able to understand better how what changes and how they are impacting your supply chain, be able to unlock the value of data and analytics in supply chain mapping. We know for many of our members, sometimes they have a limited visibility of that supply chain. They might work through several different tiers of partners, and it can be quite complex. So I think the tool was designed exactly to facilitate that data collection to the right level for you to assess risks. And then the tool also provides shareable and useful ESG metrics in key risk areas for sugarcane, both at farm and mill level, not only sugarcane, sugar beet as well. So we'll talk about that. So what the sugar mapping tool provides, so first it provides actionable insights about risks in a brand's supply chain. It gives you tools to manage supply chain data and then use that data to inform capacity building and improvement projects. So you can use the tool to follow up as well with your suppliers and ensure that the identified risks or gaps are being dealt with. You increase supply chain transparency for both sugarcane and beet. So what we said, the tool can cascade down to different tiers, and therefore you can have more visibility and understanding of your supply chain. The tool also enables you to apply the same tools to certified and non-certified suppliers. So we use a consistent methodology across your suppliers. And then Jamie will talk a little bit more about it, but we have a menu of standard and custom options. So we really want this tool to be a sector tool. So as to minimize the survey fatigue, let's say, or the requirements on suppliers. But at the same time, we recognize that different companies have different needs, and there is some level of flexibility there to enable this tool to be adjusted to your needs. But yeah, I think Jamie will expand a bit more on that later. Finally, one important message that we wanted to highlight is about what sugar mapping is not. So first, it is not a competitor to the Bonsucro production standard. This is a question that we got before from some of our members. So the key differences are the sugar mapping tool is a self-assessment tool focused on risk identification. So it is not being independently verified by an auditor, and it is designed to get a bigger picture of high-risk areas and follow-up. So it's really about mapping and due diligence, whereas the production standard goes into a greater level of detail and is a lot more about the metrics and performance monitoring of those suppliers. So it's quite a different scope, I think. And very importantly as well, it's not a magic bullet or a silver bullet for sustainability mapping. So, it doesn't do magic. It's not that you use the tool and the next day you have all the knowledge you need from everyone in your supply chain. You have, I think from the Madeline will tell a bit more about the experience from Nestle, who's already using the tool. But I think it's definitely require efforts from the company as well. And it will be good, it will be better the more you use it and the more effort you put into that work as well. So I'll hand over now to Jamie to provide an overview on SupplyShift. Jamie,
great. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Madeline. It's been an exciting journey with Bonsucro over the past few years, and really excited about what we're doing today. I'm going to give just a few slide overview about what SupplyShift is, and then turn it over to Madeline to talk about her experience developing and launching the tool with us, and then come back to do a little deeper dive on the tool itself. So what I want to emphasize here is that there is a lot more value to what we're doing than just a set of questions to identify risk. Supply chain sustainability at scale is a challenge because for years, everyone has been just blasting out their own different way of measuring everything. And not only is that challenging for suppliers, but it really limits the scalability of our efforts. So from our perspective, we focus on how do we help industries and sectors scale on supply chain sustainability. And so what we mean by that is that companies use common tools, right? So even just a supplier having a login that they can use to respond to all their customers about a certain sector is really important. Being able to repeat efforts over time and show change, being able to trend individual suppliers, groups of suppliers is really critical. Suppliers getting feedback. Suppliers will over time stop paying attention if you don't tell them how they're doing, what happens as a result of their performance. So the automation of their feedback and their peer comparisons is really critical in addition to avoiding that duplication of effort. So we want to allow them to resubmit their information to new companies that ask for the same information. Data being used across different business functions, right? Really being able to have access to dashboards and the information output from SupplyShift is really critical. It's helping these kinds of efforts scale within your business and really have the right level of impact. Being able to grow the initiatives without having them fall apart. That's going to be really critical, as what Raphael said, as we update the core assessment framework year over year. We want to be able to do that so everyone can stay on the same page and as much as possible use the exact same questions with their suppliers. And then being able to replicate this process for different issues, right? We work across many sectors and every company has many commodities. So being able to ask different questions, different framework, different issues, but the same process being used across multiple issue areas really helps companies tackle issues that pop up over time. So that's really our perspective on supply chain sustainability and why we think this is a really exciting step here for Bonsucro and the sugarcane and sugar beet community. Next slide, please. So what is SupplyShift? In general, at a very high level, it's a data network. It's a software platform for responsible supply chains. It's a multi-tier network. In other words, we can go multiple tiers, each tier cascading to the next tier so that the information flows back up to the buyer. And along the way, having each supplier who gets that same request, just being able to resubmit it to the next requester. So that's a really key part of the system, and that enables this kind of scalability that we're talking about. Definitely sustainability and mapping is not, there's no silver bullet out there. We really wish there was. But what's beautiful about this is that the more companies do it, the easier it gets for everybody. And it becomes something like a magic bullet over time, because that supplier who's gotten the request 4 times from different companies says, the next day, I know how to do this. Their logins there, they go click and you got it. So it can become really efficient the more that we all get on board with the same mechanism. So quicker time to data, quicker time to value, more scalability, and of course the insights that we can get out of this about where risk is and what to do about it. Next slide. Just high level about SupplyShift. We're really well established globally. Suppliers in I think 130 some odd countries have logged into the platform. There's 15 million data points that we've collected, platforms in 15 languages. We work across a whole range of sectors, and we're really comfortable and used to doing this with industry groups to help align, and as well as provide a level of flexibility that's also required. We'll talk about that more later, but I will now turn it over to Madeline to talk about her real direct experience using SupplyShift for sugar mapping.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, maybe we can directly go to the next slide. I give really complete feedback on what worked, what didn't work. So, I mean, as Daniel said, it was a really long process from first discussions during the Bonsucro week in Thailand back in 2019 until our first launch this year in May. So there was a lot of development of questions and making the tool kind of adaptable to what we need. So what we did is really, most of you know, we work with Proforce as our global partner for sugar. So we use the existing Excel surveys that we used to send out as a basis to develop the surveys in SupplyShift. Also because Perforce worked with a lot of other companies and they had an unbranded consolidated survey of all the different questions from several of my peer companies, including Nestle. So we used this really as a baseline. They did all the translations, so really into 5 additional languages. So we tried to cover kind of from Nestle's sourcing perspective and probably also from the production side, really the main languages. And it, yeah, as I said, we launched this year in May. It took some time to get everything ready, but then, I mean, we were able to send it out. And for us, it's really, we use a tool to map our supply chains, to know where it's coming from, and really to get a first understanding of the data that our suppliers have or the mill has. So really to really use this as to establish a picture where we would then do an additional deep dive. Next slide, please. So yeah, so basically I went ahead of this already. So this is what we said. We want to know what kind of policies do our suppliers have? How are they implemented? Do they apply only to their own operations, like the refinery, or are they cascaded down into the supply chain? Is it only for direct contracted, also independent farmers? Couple of questions related to climate and human rights related to really to get a first picture. And then based on the first collection, what we do, we use this to prioritize suppliers for additional data collection or for really deep dive or an on-site visit by Perforce and their local partners in the different sugar origins. Next slide, please. So yeah, I think this is the key part. So I mean, you all know rolling a new tool out has always its challenges. I mean, it's new, no one has seen it before. It required a lot of explaining, but eventually it did work with a lot of suppliers. Some did still prefer to receive the Excel extract to then complete an Excel file, and this was really due to internet connectivity, very remote mills. The staff didn't feel really comfortable in going to a computer, logging in, using an online tool. So we have sent them the Excel file, they completed it, they've sent it back, and I've uploaded the Excel file into SupplyShift. So this was relatively smooth. Of course, ideally, they would do it directly within in SupplyShift. But yeah, I mean, technology is a challenge and needs to be considered for online tools. We haven't seen a difference between certified and non-certified suppliers and mills in terms of reactivity or data quality. So they were both responding or not responding, and data quality, I think, goes back to some of the questions where we thought they are really easy, but we have seen apparently there were still some challenges. So we had to explain some of the question, what kind of data we were really looking for. And yeah, so we collected a lot of feedback from suppliers on the usability of the tool and to the questions. So I think we have a long list which we will use to discuss also with SupplyShift on how do we need to change, what's working, what can be improved. And as Jamie said, I mean, the platform provides a lot of benefits because it really has the potential. I think already stepping ahead, maybe you can go to the next slide, Rafa. The tool really has the potential to become an industry solution. Because, I mean, it's great to, as I said, to collect the data, to analyze the data, to share a first scoring back to suppliers. We haven't used it yet, but we will develop it to really to give each question a scoring so that suppliers also know how do they do against the Nestle requirements, or also how do they compare with their peers in the same region. So this can be set up, and this is what we are discussing with SupplyShift on for next year. And I think what I really like is that the next survey will be easier because we have engaged almost all of our suppliers, A lot of them have joined webinars, and then, as I said, we had a lot of one-on-one calls. We took them by the hand, walked them through question by question, and at the end, they've all seen it isn't that complicated. It just needed a bit of time. So next year, when we resend the survey, it will be much easier. They log in. Most of the questions will be already, or answers will be already pre-populated. So they just have to go in, check if nothing has changed. They just resubmit the survey, and that's it. If something has changed, they update the answers and then send it back. And I think what is also great is, but I think this is a question, what something that Jamie can further explain, is that it can be linked with other systems. So, for example, I mean, depending on IT setup, but it should be able to link it back to, for example, SAP, or to use other databases, which is, I think, which is really great. And from our side, next steps is really, we will take the feedback and also our experience with the tool and the questions. We will sit down, update certain questions, provide a clear example of what kind of data we are looking for. Might also just change some of the tooltips so that they really know what is expected. I'm working with Matt and Rafa to really to see, ideally, I mean, we would compare really the questions and the exact wording of certain questions with the question in Bonsucro Connect. Why? Because then it will be much easier for SupplyShift, or basically for the system, to also already pre-populate the answers, because it is already in the system. And then again, as I said, we will set up the scoring, and we plan to send it out again around April, May next year. So from now, or let's say from December until March, we will rework some of the questions and the service as well.
Thank you, Madeline. That's very helpful. Jamie, over to you again. I think now we're going into the tool itself and showing how it works and the functionalities.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Madeline. It's always, you know, to be a trailblazer comes with its challenges, and so really appreciate all that you've done to, you know, get down to what it takes to fine tune things. So, and as you said, easier for you next time, and much easier for everyone coming into this new. I imagine that the global list of all of the suppliers, the tier 1 suppliers and tier 2 suppliers and so on, is not massive. And so pretty soon this will be something that every supplier has experience with. So it'll just become easier and easier. Let's now dig in a little bit and take a look, and also talk about some of those things that we mentioned before about scoring and about customization of the assessments. You know, at the highest level, SupplyShift, one of the core values of the system is that we can offer standard and custom assessments. So standard assessments come with all that exciting value of scalability and benchmarking and ease of use. Custom assessments have some of that, but not as much, obviously. And so I already saw a question about the tool being expanded to include other byproducts of sugar, right? Definitely SupplyShift, you know, about half the assessments on the system and half of our customers use custom assessments, and others use standard assessments. So clearly the benefits of standard is great. And but we've also, in talking to the members, and some of you on the line have said, you know, what we need to ask, we've looked at the questions, we see there's additional things we need to ask. That's great. And so what we're planning is an annual cycle of reviewing and updating the core assessment. But meanwhile, anyone who signs up has the ability to also add their own questions. You could, we strongly discourage you from changing the questions that are there, from rewording them, from removing questions, because they're already built and there's a structure and there's a flow, and a lot of suppliers have already done it. We think adding questions is probably a good idea to cover areas that you haven't done. And you know, we're not going to stop you from changing questions, but we do discourage it. So given that, how does the standard assessment look, and how does it function, and how do you add and change questions? So at the highest level, the process probably makes sense already, but the idea is that it starts by mapping and assessing. There's pre-designed questionnaires with industry standard Sugarcane and sugar beet metrics and questions. Load your supplier list, deploy the assessment, and then suppliers get notifications and log in and resubmit or add their answers if they haven't yet. Once they submit, the data comes right back to you, already formatted for analysis. There are pre-built dashboards that the data just flows into, and you are welcome to slice and dice and create new graphs to your heart's desire to really focus in on the issues that are important to you. And then this allows you to drive change, right? Who are the leaders? Who's behind? Where are the opportunities for improvement? And to create a mechanism to engage based on commonly understood performance. That's high level on the process. Just a couple of the specific questions that are in there. There's obviously a whole range of questions, and we can, offline, happy to show you and dig more in. I want to run through everything here, but just a few examples. Sustainability measures. Is your product covered under a sustainability scheme? Select which of the programs that apply. Human rights, is there a policy? Upload the policy. So documentation to support. There are obviously subsequent questions to all of these that dig deeper, but just to give a flavor of what's in there. There's a focus on farmers as well, to ask the mills about the farmers that they purchase sugar from and how they work with those farmers. As here related to contract and what's in that contract related to some critical environmental and social issues. And also cane cutters as well, cane cutter labor. So that's obviously a real key issue out there in certain parts of the world. So there's a real focus on cane cutters as well. Next slide. So what are some examples of what you can do with this data, right? So here are just a few scenarios. One of your sugar facilities doesn't have a human rights policy. So there's information they can see that they don't, you see that they don't, have a dialogue with them about the importance of having that. And when and how you expect this to happen. There's a tool in the platform where you can request an action. Say, I expect this to be improved by a certain date, and they can respond, and you can have a back and forth about that within the platform. Obviously, off-platform, face-to-face or phone conversations are really important too. Some of your suppliers might not be sourcing any certified sugar, so engage with them to support their transition to working more in certified sugar, setting targets for them and working with them to get there. And obviously, real big issues around farmers and formal contracts. So trying to understand where they're at, how they compare to their peers. Madeline mentioned the ability to publish back the benchmark. It's very easy to show them, hey, compared to all the other mills in this geography or in this country, you're the only ones who don't do X, and being able to then use that to instigate a conversation. So let's look at some screenshots of the platform, how it works. This isn't everything, but just to highlight a couple of the areas. This is the scoring setup tool. So Madeline mentioned scoring. As a Bonsucro, Nestle, SupplyShift, we decided we didn't want to put standard scoring out associated with these assessments yet. And that's because, what's good and what's okay really varies between companies. Bonsucro is a standard setter, but that's for certified sugarcane. And so in this case, we can advise you, we can show you how it works. It's very simple to create thresholds. As you can, all these little dots are draggable across the top, setting thresholds for different sections based on points associated with each question. We're happy to provide you a starting point so that you can add on to that, and it's very easy to adapt that going forward, even setting up multiple rating profiles, and then with a few clicks being able to share those results back with the supplier. So it's really up to you how far and fast you want to go with placing a value judgment on the results. This is on the setup side of the assessment. So this isn't the supplier side. This is the buyer side. But these are all of the sections that are in the assessment. A little overview information about the facility, human rights measures, sustainability measures, human rights policies, certain KPIs related to environmental and social performance, how contracting is done with farmers. This happens to be the one about beet sugar. There's another one about cane sugar. So there's some focus on beet sugar and also farm size and agricultural practices. The questions are a little bit different from beet sugar to cane sugar because the issues are a little bit different as well. Just this is how it looks again from the setup side. If you want to add a question, you can do it right from this page, right? There's a button at the top that you can't see right here. This is a smaller screenshot, but you can add a question to any specific question section. all kinds of question types, multi-select, multiple choice, numeric, even we can add logic and math between the questions. So things are hidden and shown and calculate as the supplier goes through. So a huge amount of capability, and we boiled it down to something easy to start with that suppliers have already experienced. Next, please. This is an example of the dashboarding capability. So these are some of the outputs that you would see as far as being able to break down each of the responding suppliers based on the scope of their human rights policy, what's in there. The supply chain impact assessment, have the suppliers done that on social environmental issues and how that's changed over time. If you see that little plus at the top of the screen, that's where you can add a new graph. Pick which of the questions from which assessment. You can import your spend and volume data to weight the results by how much you purchased from each of the suppliers. Trend graphs, a huge amount of capability. But the nice thing is that we've already seen what's useful out of this. And so there are some predefined graphs that data just populates. Everything gets updated in real time as you add new data. Next slide. Just a little more about looking at country of origin. So this is just breaking down by country where the sugarcane comes from. So this is a really nice way to look at example of how this might look across globally. Next slide. And then mapping, right? Mapping is really a key part of this, being able to visualize each tier of the supply chain. So this is a view of the mapping capability. As you can see, the headquarters there are right there in maybe Spain, the Barcelona area, and getting supply from Africa and South America. And as these cascade down multiple tiers, these lines connect down the chain to, actually the headquarters is in New York, and the first tier is in Spain, and the second tier is where all those colorful dots are. So you can subset and filter and save different mapping views that highlight, I want to see which suppliers have a human rights policy, and then that will highlight those color-coded scores globally, and you can save that view to have a really clear picture where the hotspots are across the world in your sugar supply chain. Next slide. With one click, you can just toggle that to just see the lines and the relationships. The map view is really nice, but it's also, things can get spread out. So just a really nice way to just visualize the linkages. This is a great way to see common linkages. I didn't realize that some of my tier 1 suppliers all buy from the same tier 2 supplier. And that can be a really great way to identify a hotspot and really know where to focus if you see that everyone's buying from the same supplier and the performance isn't great. So being able to highlight the scores, toggle around and create and save different views is really a great way to identify what you should do to improve sustainability. I think that might be it for the slides. Let's see. Yeah, we are on to questions, and questions for me, questions for Raphael, questions for Madeline. We would really encourage all of you to adopt this tool sooner rather than later. I think it'll be a benefit to everyone going forward. So yes, fire away questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, you can write your questions on the Q&A, or if you want, we can unmute you as well if you prefer. So I did get a couple of questions. So the first one from Natalia, I think you already spoke about this, Jamie, whether the two can be used on other byproducts of sugar, like neutral spirit or molasses. And yes, I think if you think about the agricultural commodity, those risks will be common across all the derivative products of sugarcane, right? Regardless if it's rum or bioplastics or sugar, the agricultural risks are the same. So I think, and that's going back to Jamie's point of trying to keep the consistency and harmonization of the two is very important, exactly because of those points. Sorry, some of those risks will be common regardless of the product. But of course, if there are product-specific questions or areas where an assessment is needed, for example, that's where I think the customization side comes in to help you. But overall, from the kind of agricultural sustainability point of view, or even the milling sustainability point of view at that level, those risks, issues, or things that are relevant from a sustainability point of view, they should be common across products, right? So yeah, I don't know, Jamie or Madeline, if you would like to add to that. you have any other views?
I would just say that the capability is there, and let's see. We might not need to change much, right? It might be just perfect how it is. We might need to change some wording, might need to add some questions, but definitely part of the solution.
Thank you.
Great. So should we look at another question there? How are requests for information cascaded across multiple tiers? So the way it works is that the tier 1 supplier receives the request, and they're then prompted to say who is in your sugar supply chain that sells to the buyer. And then they add their suppliers. They might have already done so because they've gone through this process already. And then they forward that request down to the next tier. As a buyer, you can see who's received the assessment. You can track who's responded down at multiple tiers. We've recently added automated reminders for the sub tiers, right? So letting the buyer understand what's going on without invading too much on what's going down there has been an exciting way that we've fine-tuned things over time. So it's a cascading request that goes tier by tier, and then submitted results go back up to the buyer. Sorry, yeah, Madeline?
Maybe I can just quickly add the experience with the cascading of the surveys, because this was, I'd say, mixed success. I think this is one area that needs to be covered more when we onboard suppliers, to explain the process and really explain where to click and how to cascade it. This didn't work great for many suppliers. They depend a bit where they were, but I think this is definitely needs a great functionality, especially also that we see who received it. But we have seen that this just needed a bit additional follow-up and chasing and explaining.
Yeah, suppliers aren't generally used to that request, right? And so partly there's resistance, partly there's maybe a little bit of like, wow, that's different. And then we've also, even based on this experience and others, are continue to fine tune the experience so it becomes really obvious. And we've added some things to overlay some really quick guidance on how it's done. So really trying to hit those 3 challenges all at once. And again, once they've done it, they'll do it again. So it's kind of this peeling back the onion on the supply chain.
Yeah, it was also a bit to get then the suppliers who received it to respond.
Yep.
Because what we've seen is that a lot of suppliers did forward it, but then their suppliers, they have never sent it back. And we chased them up, but then at the end, what they did is that they've used the Excel file to send it back. So, yeah.
Linkages, another question from Natalia there, talking about the last slide about linkages. Can you see the farmers, or until which level is it possible to see? So this assessment is designed to go down to the mill level. And the reason for that is that farmer records are not consistently kept by the mills. Farmers change a lot. Locations of farmers are often not known. So it doesn't really make sense to go all the way down to that level. Obviously, we know that the farmers are pretty close to the mills, so it's not too difficult to know generally where the farmers are. We do have other programs that do go down to farm level, and you're welcome to take it to that next stage. But we think it's probably more efficient to focus on how the mills work with the farmers currently as a better leverage point.
Thank you, Jim. Just adding to that, I think one of the points around farmer data that it's interesting to point out. So as you've seen in some of the questions, the tool is referring back to certification systems, right, that are working with the farmers as well. So I think, for example, if you're buying Bonsucro certified sugar, if you're asking that question from the suppliers and you get an answer on whether the sugar was certified or not, you know that if it was certified sugar, it's coming from a certified area. So I think that's a way as well. So there are different questions that relate or can give you a better understanding of the farmers, but it's not that the questions are going all the way to the farmer directly, as Jamie said. I see we have another question on the Q&A from Carolina. So she's asking, how long does it take to apply the SupplyShift questionnaire? Is there any audit that verifies the information? So I think the question on time, I'll leave to Madeline and Jamie, especially Madeline. And then regarding the audit, so please correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but I believe it is a self-declaration, right? So it's filled by the farms and the mills, but of course, the level of assurance can be determined by the recipient of the data, right? So if you are a buyer company and you want to carry out additional checks or do an audit in that supplier to verify the information, I think that's a possibility. But of course, I think the tool is trying to minimize that to some extent because we're using common questions and industry referenced questions, as we said. So it should minimize the need for that validation, but it is up to the company, I suppose. Is that right, Jamie? Would you?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I think down the road, it might make sense to look at whether companies want to, share the cost and the results of on-site verification. And maybe Madeline can speak to, I think there's additional layer that Madeline and Nestle do, but that's not part of the current tool. And the other part about how long it takes, maybe Madeline can answer that. And also, Madeline, maybe how long do you think it'll take you next time? Because I know that the first time was probably much more work than the next time will be.
Yeah, I mean, we have started the process second week of May. We started with a 3-week deadline. We were still chasing suppliers in late October, and then we have decided we stop, and we stop there and just redo the exercise next year. So it was around 5-6 months, but to be honest, this was very similar to what it took with certain suppliers before via email and Excel files. As I said, certain suppliers responded very quickly. Others needed a lot of one-on-one calls really to explain it. Then they went back to their field staffs. Then they've submitted answers. And for us, we verified because, again, my partners First, they're involved in the entire process. They are chasing suppliers, they are explaining the questions to suppliers, they help them, they verified the data provided. And since they've been working with Nestle and my suppliers for 8 years, they knew for a lot of suppliers if the answers are correct or not. So they could really go back and request additional information, or could say, hey, but this doesn't match, please update. So, and this is, I think, what that took the longest to really sending surveys back, asking for updates and complete the surveys. So, but again, next year will be easier because we also have our lessons learned from our side. We will start earlier. We will organize more direct and customized webinars and calls. So, but yeah, I would say I hope the next time goes much faster, at least for the suppliers who did respond in the tool this year. And then we will just do more direct follow-ups with the ones that didn't respond in the survey in the tool this year to help them right from the beginning.
Thank you, Madeline. I have another question to you, Madeline, from Johan, who's asking, what new supply chain insights did you have from working with the pilots?
I would say nothing really new. It's what it has shown is that the supply chains keep on changing year on year, and you really have to engage your suppliers on an annual basis, unless you work with European beet suppliers or in certain countries where there's a more stable supply. But I think the main insight is that it changes. We have seen some improvements really on data availability and also what kind of data suppliers have, because we did ask for shape files for farm polygons in order to do our assessments for deforestation and land use change. So this was good, so that we got additional information. But other than that, as I said, the survey is based on the Excel file that we used before, and the engagement and data collection that Forest has been doing for us for the last 8 years. So it was more really for us, it was important to move from Excel to an online tool which should support the suppliers in simplifying it in the future, and also for us to have a tool to really do analytics and comparisons directly in the tool instead of having to work with Excel.
Thank you, Madeline. Another question from Raphael. As it's hard to segregate certified to non-certified volumes, will the buyer have access through this application to the exact volumes that are sourced from certified and non-certified farmers or mills, for which Tom sourced for the buyer company? So, Raphael, feel free to correct me, but if I understand correctly, you're asking if the tool enables you to understand the proportion of certified volumes from that in relation to the volumes you buy, right, as a buyer. So I don't know, Jamie, would you like to take that? I have an answer, but I think you might want to jump in as well. So from my perspective, is that so the tool is not collecting.
Since it froze, maybe I take it, because there is a question where we do ask for
a separate, usually control.
You froze for a bit, Raphael.
Oh, sorry about that.
So
can you hear me now?
I was just saying, so we do have a question where we really ask for certified volume, and how much of the volume supplied to us comes from certification. We're also asking for what kind of certification they use. And this was, I would say, this was the main question that caused a lot of confusion, because we asked really what for the volume supplied to us, but we received all kinds of answers of the annual crushing capacity, milling capacity. So this was the main question that we want to change for next year, to provide a clear answer, an example of what kind of volume we're actually looking for. But there's a specific question for this, yes. So really to see cane split, beet split, certified, and what kind of certification, or if they have an own program.
Thank you, Madeline. So yes. So I was wrong then. It is a percentage of the volume. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, no further questions. Okay, so I think we can close for now. Of course, we will share the material with everyone. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to contact us. We can get to those questions via email, or if you want to schedule a conversation with Bonsucro and SupplyShift, we can do that as well, and we'll take it from there. We will be reaching out to you as companies individually to discuss this separately. But yeah, I think it's very exciting. We are very excited about it. I think it's something that can really have an impact, and a scalable impact in the sector. So really looking forward to continue our work with Nestle, with SupplyShift, and hopefully with many of you to implement that tool in the sector. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Jamie and Madeline, for your time. And yeah, really looking forward to speaking soon again.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great morning, afternoon, and night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.